This is Martin Giles, the Guildford Dragon News, and I'm with Will Salmon, who's a Liberal Democrat borough councillor who was elected in 2019 and who works in franchising. Hi, Will. Thank you for joining the Guildford Dragon.
Hi, Martin. Delighted to be here.
So, as you know, this is a part of a series of interviews I'm doing with backbench councillors who don't get as much attention as those on the executive or who are the leader of groups. So thank you for agreeing to take part in the interview. And can we start off by you telling me something about the experience you've had as being a councillor? You know, is it what you expected? What are the pitfalls? What are the good things about it? How do you find it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating. It's been very exciting and really interesting overall. But there's a lot to take on board. There's a lot to learn for sure. So, you know, I was not involved in politics before in any big way, just very interested in what's going on. And starting as a councillor, there's a lot of training. You need to get up to speed on governance and things to do with planning laws and licensing laws, depending what committees you're on. So there's a lot to learn. And that was both fascinating, but also, you know, there's a lot of very experienced councillors who know a lot. So you're always trying to catch up as a new councillor. So that was definitely a really interesting part of it. I suppose for me, it's what's been really rewarding about being a councillor has been getting a really deep connection with the community I'm in. So I'm in Onslow. Well, I'm not in Onslow Village per se, but in the Onslow ward. But my kids go to school in the area. So I'm always walking around and running into people who are, you know, residents of Onslow, and it's just a great chance to connect with them on so many things that matter, and very often trying to help them resolve any issues they've got. And just, you know, there's all sorts of things from housing applications, hedges and potholes, which very often aren't to do with Guildford Borough, but there's a lot of signposting to things we can help. So it's been great in terms of the community engagement and getting to know everyone really well. And very rewarding in that respect. You know, when you solve problems, it really, you know, it feels very good. So that's all definitely on the plus side.
Okay, has it all been good?
It's not been without complications as well. Obviously, finding out how local government works has been really interesting, but at the same time challenging, because you discover the limits of what you can do. So as I was saying, certain things are Surrey County Council things, and you find sometimes that's frustrating because you have to, you know, work in a sort of very multifaceted way to get anything done. So, you know, for those reasons, talk about unitaries is something that is of interest. And as a party, we've said that a sort of 3-borough unitary could be a very good solution in the future. So those are conversations I find very interesting. But at the moment, those frustrations that there are so many bodies that you need to work with to get things done when residents bring things forward, it can be quite difficult. They just want to go to one person and say, look at this pothole, can you sort it? And finding out how much is involved in doing that is quite tricky. So yeah, things like that are definitely frustrating. And then the same goes for planning, whereby, you know, there's an awful lot that comes from central government. And residents will often say, well, you know, you can just say no to this thing, and actually very often you cannot. So that's one of the things that I find really frustrating. And certainly looking at certain local media, things like Facebook, or even sometimes in the Dragon, you do get comments to the effect that, you know, councillors are either, you know, corrupt or just, you know, in the pockets of developers. And I have to say, I do find that deeply, you know, frustrating, because if only they knew actually what the constraints are, I think there'd be a lot more understanding. So that is something why I'm really supportive of what you're doing here, Martin, which is sort of getting people on and also getting points of view from councillors and understanding the process better, because I think there is a general level of information about how it all works that I think really would help for people to trust their local councillors, that actually people are coming from a place of good faith and trying to do the best for their community.
Okay, so what motivated you to stand in the first place, and why through the Lib Dems?
So we moved to the area in 2016. I'm originally from London. My wife is the Surrey connection here. She's from Woking, but we were always coming to Guildford for family reasons, as my wife's mum is in Godalming, and we always came through Guildford, and I really came to love the place and suggested that we should move here. So I felt very very connected to it since bringing my family here, and always wanted to sort of give back to the community in any which way we could. And on moving here, I did keep seeing Facebook posts from Angela Goodwin and Caroline Reeves, as they're in the area that I'm in, and they were constantly informing us of, you know, how to get things resolved or where to go with things, and interesting news about what's coming up in Guildford. And I was just, who are these people? And I actually got in touch with them. I spoke to Caroline Reeves about a particular idea, got a chance to meet her, and slowly but surely sort of got more involved. And then I was doing deliveries in the area, and then that sort of moved in 2019 to being offered the chance to stand as a councillor. And at that point, it was, you know, quite a big decision, because with a full-time job, it seemed like, you know, would that be even possible? But I did want to give it a go. And
well, you mentioned your job there. So how do you manage your work, councillor, and family life balance?
It's definitely a challenge, but it's a very rewarding challenge. I will look at lunchtimes and evenings and weekends to try and fit as much as I can in. It is pretty much having a substantial part-time job on top of a full-time job, so it's not easy. And I also became a governor at Onslow Infant School, where my sons have been. So, you know, that's again the sort of doing things in the community where my family is was really important, and being a governor is a fantastic thing to be able to do. But again, it's a lot of commitment. So there's definitely a balance to be done. But it's because it's so rewarding, because it's so you know, meaningful for my family and all the people around us, that's what really makes it possible to keep going. But yeah, it's a lot of work. I can't kid anyone.
How many hours do you think you spend a week on councillor business?
I could not speculate, because each week is different.
On average,
Sometimes
though.
Sorry?
On average, though.
I really couldn't say, because I don't think I've ever had an average week. Sometimes you'll have, you know, 3 meetings in a week. Sometimes there might be 0, and or, you know, you might be reading in one week and not the next. So it's very different. It's very hard to quantify, to say, oh, you know, it's X number of hours. So I've never tried to do that, but it's substantial. I mean, it's
how many? What's your caseload like? How many cases have you got going on at the moment for residents?
Again, that varies. So some weeks you'll have half a dozen, and then other weeks there'll be not many. Right. Sometimes it might be even, you know, a parent outside the school gates saying, oh, do you know about this or that, and can you look into it? So it's not all formalized through, you know, council email. Even it's very often the people you bump into, and things that come up. So and at any given moment, there's always stuff going on, for sure. Okay. But again, I wouldn't like to say my inbox looks like this, but I would say it's a full inbox as much as I get in my regular job.
Okay. Now, Will, this is a big question I'd like to ask you. Well, I think it's a big question. What is the Lib Dem position on the local plan? Because it didn't seem to feature in your campaign in 2019 as much as some other parties. And your the Lib Dem councillors at the time the plan was adopted, Caroline Reeves, you've mentioned, she was the leader. She voted in favour of it, but she was the only one that did. So what is the Lib Dem position on it now?
Well, it's actually surprisingly something that's very hard to have a position on when the thing has happened. It was voted for in 2019, and we cannot just undo it. There's no sort of reverse on it. So in terms of our monthly meetings and having a position, it's not quite like that to be able to say what our position is. It's more a case of trying to make the best of the process as it is and has to be, until such a time as anything might change. And so, you know, from my point of view in Onslow, I have to be very careful here, because I'm actually a sub on the planning committee. I can't speak too much about it. And again, that's one of the issues that we were talking about earlier, with the constraints on councillors and the ability to, you know, speak your mind or just make things the way you might want them to be. I am very live to the feelings in Onslow Village about the Blackwell Farm sites. How could I not be? And I know the voting record in my patch, and I know what my residents would love to happen. All that said, where we are is where we are, and the best that we can hope for is to make sure that at present, when any plans come forward, they are going to be of the highest quality builds, they're going to be environmentally sustainable, and the infrastructure will meet everything that has to meet in order to go through. And that's kind of where we have to be. I'm very mindful of the fact that, you know, there's conversations about the numbers, you know, the fact that we have a housing target, and actually that's what are the drivers behind that. Student numbers and things like that are all being looked at, and I'm absolutely supportive of that happening. But equally, I'm mindful of the fact that if we do it wrong, you can end up with a bigger annual number. So I think, roughly speaking, you know, it's 580 per year is the current number. But if the government was to sort of, after a request for review, look at it again, come back with a number like 780, you're in a much worse place than you were. So we have to be mindful of that. Is this something you're familiar with, the fact of the review?
Yes, of
and
course.
the delivery number changing?
But I think there's a perception that your former colleague Jan Harwood was very much of the view that the review, you had to be careful about the review because you could end up with a higher number. But others think that that was associated with his tacit acceptance of the local plan, let's put it that way, as it was, and that actually he wasn't as active as he should have been in getting the review going, and that's happening more now since he's left. What do you think that's true?
Oof, I really can't answer or speculate about what Jan did or didn't want to do. It's all been, you know, a lot of things that he may have thought or done. I can't even begin to guess because, you know, we didn't actually, a lot of it went on behind the scenes, especially as a backbencher. I wouldn't have insight into that.
Okay, did you have conversations with him about it?
Not really, no. There was always a lot going on, so
okay.
Not on that.
So
what
did you make of his defection when it happened? I mean, were you as surprised as I was, or did you see it coming?
I was very surprised. Yeah, it's a real mystery. It remains a real mystery because there's not been sort of any sort of follow-up. Well, I've seen the explanation through the Dragon, and
yeah, he wrote a whole opinion piece on it.
Yeah. So I've read that, but I suppose I don't really recognise all the claims in there, to be honest. So
okay.
it remains a mystery, and you know, good luck to him. But we're getting on with things in the Liberal Democrats, and you know, we're working on how to deliver as much as we can for our residents.
So you don't recognise his assertions that the your group was disorganised and that was infighting within it?
No, I don't recognise that at all. I think, you know, that he may have seen debate as being disorganized, who knows, but that's democracy. As a group, we discuss things. We do have a lot of meetings where everyone will have a chance to contribute, and we'll often vote on things. So, you know, some people don't like that. And also we're in a no overall control situation where the things that we want to do is often negotiated with R4GV. And, you know, that can be frustrating for some people that things have to be done democratically and discussed and debated. Maybe that can look like disorganization, I don't know, but certainly that's not what I see when we have our group meetings. And, you know, there is disagreement on a few topics, but we always get there in the end around a consensus point. And generally, you know, I would say that I work alongside some amazing colleagues who share my values. And I think we're all just very concentrated on delivering the very best for our residents and, you know, the widest community.
Your colleague, Councillor George Potter, he went on the record to say that if Jan Harwood thought he was going to be elected as the under your sharing agreement, the Lib Dems will take back the leadership of the council in the autumn, the coming autumn. He said that if Jan Harwood thought he was a shoo-in, I don't think he used that term, but if he thought he was going to, you know, it was going to be simply he would be nominated as the next council leader, he was mistaken. I think that's what most people assumed was going to happen. Was that wrong?
You mean all of this prior to moving to the
I
Conservatives?
mean, the assumption that that Jan Harwood was going to take over from Joss Bigmore in the autumn.
Well, as I say, all these things do get voted on in our group. So I would say that would be subject to a vote. And that's now a hypothetical that we can't even enter.
Absolutely,
because he's moved on. So,
but why I'm sorry, so I'm sorry I'm pursuing it. But the reason why is because it does seem that things, weren't as all amicable within the group as people maybe thought.
I don't see that. I really don't.
Okay.
This is just my perspective. But I see a group of people very like-minded getting on with business. So I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay.
I can't say there's anything there that I recognise.
Okay. Now, do you what is your feeling about the support for you and your party within Onslow Village at the moment?
I would like to think it depends what residents have made of the last few years and over the next few, but I like to think it's pretty good. In as much as I do get out there, I meet the Residents Association. We've done some terrific projects together. I don't know if you're aware of Jubilee Gardens and the centenary that we had for Onslow Village this year. So,
yes, I did hear about it, yes.
I mean, that's been a really great thing to be involved in. And then on various other things, a lot of my residents are very keen on environmental issues. And, I speak to many of them about that. And I think they're generally impressed and happy with the seriousness with which this administration takes it and the steps we're taking. Mm-hmm. So, in the sense of the man on the Clapham omnibus, are people happy with the sorts of things that we talk about and we're trying to get on with at council? I think they are. I think people probably don't know the full extent of the budget constraints. The 10 years of reductions in council funding from the central government, I think, is a massive and largely underreported issue.
Well, that we have tried to report it, and
yes, and I thought that was a great interview with Joss on the topic. But
and Tim Anderson.
Yeah, but when I speak to people out, in the streets, and they say, "Oh, you get all of our council tax." It's actually, we get a very thin slice of that council tax, and actually, the amount that we receive through your income tax is dwindling to a very small amount. So
perhaps you can encourage more of your constituents to read the Guildford Dragon.
I'm a massive supporter of local journalism. I have to say, I think it's really, really vital. As we alluded to, I work in media myself. And I actually think with, the online platforms and disinformation, I think these are some of the most worrying trends in our times that undermine trust in politics and all sorts of, important work that goes on. I think local news is absolutely vital in restoring that trust and making people understand the good faith, the sort of fact that people like me and my colleagues really are trying to.
Well, you can imagine that's music to my ears, Will, because actually I do see social media as the Dragon's competitor more than other media outlets. In fact, if I was satisfied with the level of local news that other people were producing, I might be able to put my feet up. But until that time, I do feel duty bound to keep going. But anyway, that was interesting that you raised that, and I hope personally, I hope that is recognised amongst your colleagues too. Guildford's Dragon's not perfect. No, nothing's perfect. We all know that, but we do our best to be balanced and fair. And not everyone will agree because they all have their own particular points of view. But I agree with you very much that it's important that the news is out there and properly processed news, not just someone's
opinion. Yeah, because we see far too much sort of opinion ding dong, and it's the article you want to read the most is what someone's opinion is, but actually the facts are what matters, and sometimes that does get lost.
That's true.
Very much gets lost in social media.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay. So
subject for another day.
Sorry?
It's a subject for another day.
Yeah, well, we've covered it a bit there, and I'm grateful for that. Finally then, so you think that your local constituents are fairly happy with you and your party. Are you going to stand again in 2023? And are you confident that you'll win?
I've had a great time so far as a councillor, and I would very much like to stand when the time comes again, but it will be subject to family commitments and how the balance we discussed earlier is working out, as obviously that's a very big part of my life as well. At the moment, I'm doing as well as I can, and I feel like I'm staying on top of it. And ultimately, it would be for those residents to decide if they wanted me, if I did stand. But yeah, as things stand, I would like to, for sure.
Okay, well, Councillor Will Salmon, thank you very much for giving your time for this interview, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks, Martin. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.